There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it poisons it. That was the air inside our house the night everything began to rot from the inside out. My wife, Lauren, sat at the other end of the living room, scrolling through her phone like nothing outside that screen was worth a damn second of her attention. She had this tight, fake smile she wore lately, like she was humoring me the way you humor a neighbor you hate. I didn't call it out. I just watched her fingers tapping the screen, faster and faster, like she couldn't wait to be somewhere or with someone else. I told myself it was stress. God knows she liked to wear stress-like jewelry. But there was no missing the way she barely looked at me anymore. No missing the way she snapped at every word I said, no matter how careful I was. It wasn't normal. It wasn't survivable. Hannah, our daughter, or so I thought, sat in the armchair beside her, headphones on, humming to music I could hear leaking out in tinny bursts. I was trying to get through the evening without sparking another argument, telling myself things would get better if I just kept my head down. But then Hannah took off her headphones, looked me dead in the eye, and without a hint of hesitation, dropped the bomb. "You know you're not even my real dad, right?" she said, like she was commenting on the weather, like it didn't matter. The floor dropped out under me. For a second, I couldn't even understand the words. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misheard. Maybe I was so desperate for everything to stay normal that I was imagining things. But Hannah just kept going, stabbing the knife deeper without even raising her voice. "My real dad's way better than you. He actually cares." Lauren didn't even flinch. She didn't deny it. She didn't scold her. She didn't say anything at all. She just kept scrolling on her phone, pretending she wasn't hearing her own daughter rip my guts out. I felt something inside me crack. A cold, clean break. It wasn't rage, not yet. It wasn't sadness either. It was something worse, the sudden, horrifying realization that I'd been living inside someone else's story. Someone else's lie. And they were done even pretending I belonged here. I didn't ask questions. I didn't plead. I stood up so fast the chair behind me clattered to the ground. Lauren finally looked up then, blinking like she was surprised I still existed. I said very quietly, "Is that true?" Lauren's mouth twisted into a smirk so small I almost missed it. She shrugged as if this was ancient history I was being dramatic about. "You always wanted a family," she said. "I gave you one. Stop being ungrateful. Ungrateful. Ungrateful for spending 14 years raising a kid that wasn't mine," while she laughed behind my back. My hands were shaking. I turned to Hannah, who just stared at me like I was a bug she'd outgrown. I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't even know if she knew the whole story or if Lauren had poisoned her against me, drop by drop, for years. Lauren stood up then, casually, like she was stretching after a long movie. "You're acting like a victim," she said, voice dripping boredom. "You're not. You were just convenient." Convenient. I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to speak. I walked to the hallway, grabbed my keys from the counter, and stepped outside into the night air that felt heavier than any prison cell. I could hear them laughing behind me before the door even closed. Not arguing. Not panicking. Laughing. The betrayal wasn't just deep. It was complete. Total. The man I had been before that night, the one who believed in second chances, in fixing broken things, died somewhere between Hannah's words and Lauren's laughter. And what rose up in his place wasn't interested in forgiveness. It was interested in truth. And vengeance. I didn't drive anywhere. I sat in the truck with the engine running, the headlights carving out two useless tunnels into the dark street. My hands gripped the steering wheel until they hurt, but I didn't feel it. I was replaying everything in my head, every birthday, every scraped knee I bandaged, every school play I sat through, beaming like a fool, thinking I was somebody's father. Thinking I mattered. I didn't know how long I sat there, but eventually the porch light flipped off behind me. They weren't worried. They weren't sorry. They went to sleep. I couldn't. At some point, something inside me snapped from thought into action. I wasn't going to let them pretend I didn't exist. I wasn't going to slink off and disappear like a ghost. I turned off the engine, walked back up the steps, and let myself quietly into the house. The floorboards didn't creak under my weight. Even the house knew to stay silent. The living room was abandoned, only the soft glow of Lauren's discarded phone lighting the corner of the couch. I picked it up, unlocked as if daring me to look. The texts were still open. And they weren't to girlfriends. They were to someone named T, short texts, full of ugly little secrets. "T, you tell him yet?" Lauren, why would I? He's pathetic. T, you're still coming over tomorrow, right? Lauren, obviously. Can't wait to get out of here. Scrolling further was like dragging myself through broken glass barefoot. Photos. Inside jokes. Plans. Conversations about how annoying I was, how easy it was to keep me distracted. Whole sections of my life dissected and mocked like I was some stray dog they kept around out of pity. And then the photo that made my stomach turn. Not graphic. Worse. It was Lauren and T at a restaurant I thought she hated. The same one I once begged her to try with me. She said it was too cheap. Funny how cheap didn't matter when it wasn't with me. I placed the phone back on the couch, screen down, and walked to the bedroom. I stood there for a moment in the doorway watching Lauren sprawled across the bed like she didn't have a care in the world. And just for a moment, just a fraction of a second, I considered letting it go. Walking out. Never coming back. But then her words from earlier echoed in my head, "You were just convenient." I stepped into the room. Lauren stirred, blinking at me like I was an inconvenience in her dream. "Did you forget something?" She mumbled. I flipped the light switch on, flooding the room in harsh, unforgiving white. She sat up fast, shielding her eyes. "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I just asked, very calmly, "Who's T?" For a split second, a tiny crack, I saw real fear in her face. Then it was gone, masked under that same thin, mocking smile. "You're pathetic," she said, voice flat. Going through my phone. "How desperate can you be?" "I'm not the one desperate," I said. "You are. That's why you've been sneaking around like a teenager who thinks her dad won't notice." Lauren laughed. Actually laughed. She swung her legs off the bed and stood up, squaring off against me like we were about to settle a bet at a bar. "You think you're some big detective now?" She sneered. "You think you're gonna corner me and I'm just gonna cry and apologize? Wake up. You're not the victim here. You're the idiot who didn't notice." I stood there, feeling the last, fraying threads of what I thought was my life snap free, one by one. I wasn't married to a woman who made a mistake. I was tied to a woman who despised me, who saw me as less than nothing. Lauren stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint, unfamiliar cologne on her shirt, not mine, never mine, and smiled. "If you had any self-respect," she whispered, "you'd pack your S***** and leave tonight." I looked her dead in the eye, steady and cold. "You want me gone?" A slow, satisfied nod. "Good," I said. "Because when I leave, I'm not taking just my things. I'm taking your lies with me." For the first time, her smile faltered. Just slightly. Just enough to taste. And it was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen. The only light coming from the fridge I kept opening and closing without knowing why. Lauren slammed the bedroom door around midnight. I didn't react. I wasn't here to fight anymore. I was here to finish something. At 6:07 a.m., while the sky was still a filthy gray outside, I started packing. Not my clothes. Not my things. Evidence. I wasn't walking out empty-handed the way she expected. Lauren had spent years weaving her little fantasy life, and I was about to burn it to the ground, brick by brick. First, the laptop, the one she thought she kept locked. Lauren wasn't half as smart as she thought she was. Password was our daughter's birthday with an exclamation point. How poetic. Emails. Receipts. Photos. Chats she never bothered to delete. Somewhere between reading how she introduced me to her friends as the moron who pays the bills and seeing a hotel reservation in another city during a weekend she told me she was visiting her sick aunt, my hands stopped shaking. I was past anger now. Past sadness. Past betrayal. There's a place beyond all that, a cold, clear place where everything makes perfect sense. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to expose her. By the time the sun started clawing its way over the rooftops, I had what I needed saved onto a USB drive tucked safely into my pocket. Hannah came down the stairs as I was pouring myself black coffee as if nothing had happened. She didn't even look at me. Just brushed past like I was a stranger crowding her space. Something sharp twisted in my gut, but I locked it down. Lauren breezed into the kitchen a few minutes later, hair perfectly styled, makeup done, dressed in jeans and a sweater just casual enough to look innocent. "You're still here," she said, fake surprised. I sipped my coffee. Not for long. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, giving me that smirk again. "Good. Make sure you don't forget your dignity when you go." I nodded slowly, feeling every muscle in my body tighten. You'll want to be home tonight, I said, voice calm. Might be some visitors. She frowned, the first crack of confusion breaking through her armor. What are you talking about? I just smiled, not cruel, not angry. Just sad. You'll see. I walked out before she could get another word in. Walked straight to the car and drove across town, the USB drive heavy in my pocket like a loaded weapon. My first stop was Tom's house, Lauren's boss. Funny thing about Tom, he was a family man. Big on appearances. Bigger on company image. I dropped a sealed envelope into his mailbox with no return address. Inside, every email Lauren had sent using her company laptop, including several where she detailed using company funds to cover weekend trips with T. Spoiler alert, T wasn't Tom. Next, I sent another package to her sister, the one who adored Lauren, the one who believed every sob story Lauren spun about being trapped in a loveless marriage with a cruel husband. And last, the bomb. An anonymous email to the PDA board complete with timestamps and photos showing Lauren on her supposed charity weekends with T's arm wrapped around her in a bar 2 towns over. By noon, it was done. By 3, the first cracks started to appear. Lauren called me 12 times in a row. I didn't pick up. The 12th call came with a text, "What did you do?" I watched the message pop up then fade away. Nothing she could say mattered anymore. Around 5 p.m. I parked a block away from the house and watched through the trees as Lauren's world began to unravel. First, a silver car pulled into the driveway, Tom. Then her sister showed up, face stormy, throwing the car door open so hard it bounced back. Lauren ran out onto the porch, hands up, mouth moving too fast to follow. Tom shouted something. Her sister shouted louder. Hannah stood behind Lauren, confused, scared, but Lauren barely noticed. They were cornering her, demanding answers, and Lauren, who always had the right lie ready, was stammering. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. When Lauren grabbed Hannah by the arm and tried to drag her inside, Hannah ripped herself free and shouted something that made Lauren's face crumple like wet paper. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't have to. It was over. The lies, the little kingdom she built on deceit, the smug certainty that she would never face consequences, it was all crumbling around her in real time. And I sat in my car, watching the ruins of a life that never really belonged to me. I didn't drive away immediately. I stayed long enough to see Lauren fall to her knees on the porch, hands tangled in her hair, screaming into the evening air. No one helped her up. No one touched her. They just stood there, watching her drown in the wreckage she made. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel anything at all. I waited until the last car pulled away from the driveway before stepping out of mine. The sun was dipping low, throwing long shadows across the street. The house looked different now, smaller somehow, hollowed out like the shell of something that used to be alive. When I walked up the steps, Lauren was still sitting on the porch, knees pulled to her chest, mascara streaked down her face in 2 black rivers. She looked up when she heard my boots hit the top step. For a second, she opened her mouth like she was going to say something. An apology maybe, a plea. But then she saw my face and shut it. I wasn't here for her. I pushed open the front door and stepped inside. The living room looked wrecked. A broken vase, papers scattered across the floor. One of the dining chairs tipped onto its side. In the middle of the mess stood Hannah. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She just stood there, arms folded tight across her chest, mouth set in a hard, stubborn line that didn't belong on a 15-year-old girl's face. When she saw me, she straightened up, like bracing for a hit that would never come. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. "You knew," I said. Her chin lifted slightly, defiant. "So what if I did? So you've been lying to me, too," I said, voice calm, but so cold I barely recognized it as mine. She shrugged. "Everyone lies." The words hit harder than any punch could have. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "Is that what she taught you?" Hannah didn't answer. Didn't have to. The bitterness in her eyes said it all. I stepped closer, slowly, careful like approaching a wounded animal. "You think he's better?" I asked quietly. "This man you've never lived with, never seen when things got hard? At least he's not pathetic," she spat. The hit landed clean. No hesitation. No regret. Something inside me, something soft and desperate that had been clinging on for her sake, died right then and there. You're right, I said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't break. It just was. I'm not your real father. And you're not my real daughter. The words hung there, heavy and brutal, between us. For the first time, something flickered across her face, a flash of uncertainty, of fear maybe, but it was too late. I wasn't here to fix this. I wasn't here to carry the weight anymore. I moved past her toward the staircase. She called after me, voice sharper now, a little crack in it. Where are you going? Packing my things, I said. And when I leave, you'll get what you wanted. You can have your real dad. Let's see how long that fantasy lasts. No one's stopping you. She shouted at my back, but the words sounded thin now, desperate, not nearly as strong as she wanted them to be. I packed fast, not the careful folding of a man hoping to come back, but the rough grabbing of someone who wanted every last trace of this house off his skin. A duffel bag. My wallet. A few photos I couldn't bring myself to leave behind, even if they were lies. As I came back down the stairs, bag slung over my shoulder, Lauren stood in the entryway blocking the door. Her face was twisted up, half rage, half panic. You're really doing this? She said, voice shaking. You did this, I said. She reached out, maybe to touch me, maybe to stop me, but I stepped back like she was poisonous. You don't just get to walk away. She hissed. You owe us. The laughter that broke out of me was raw and ugly and real. Owe you? I said. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing but lies. Congratulations, Lauren. You won. I pushed past her, the door swinging wide open. She stood there in the doorway, screaming something, insults, demands, promises. I don't know, I don't care, but I didn't look back. I didn't flinch. I walked to the truck, threw the bag in the passenger seat, and drove. I didn't check the mirrors. I didn't care if she stood there all night watching me leave. For the first time in 14 years, I wasn't running after her. I was running towards something else. Freedom. The real beginning hadn't even started yet. I didn't drive far that night. I pulled into a grimy old motel off the highway, the kind of place people go when they've got nowhere left to be. I checked in without a word, dropped my bag on the threadbare carpet, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall as the weight of everything started to press down. I thought the silence would heal me. Instead, it gnawed at me. Images kept flashing in my head, Lauren laughing behind my back, Hannah looking at me like I was dirt, that message on her phone calling me pathetic, convenient. I kept hearing her voice say, you don't just get to walk away. But I had. And that's when the phone started vibrating. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. I let it rattle against the nightstand until it went quiet. I didn't need to check to know who it was. I wasn't playing the game anymore. But just as I was about to turn off the phone completely, a new number lit up the screen. Unknown. Something about it prickled under my skin, a sick instinct rising. Against my better judgment, I answered. The voice on the other end was male, low, cocky, full of lazy confidence, like he was stepping into a bar fight he thought he'd already won. That you, old man? I didn't respond. I just waited. The voice laughed. Guess you heard the news. Lauren's mine now. Always has been. My knuckles whitened around the phone, but I kept my voice dead calm. You must be T. Another laugh. Louder, mocking. You're slow, but you're not stupid. Listen, figured I'd be a gentleman and give you some advice. Don't come around anymore. You're not wanted. The words didn't hit the way he wanted. They slid right off the shell I'd built over the last 24 hours. I stayed silent so long he finally filled it himself. You had your shot. You lost. Let it go before you embarrass yourself more than you already have. There was a clatter in the background, laughter, clinking glasses, like he was calling me from a party. Their party. My family celebrating the funeral of the life I thought I had. I ended the call without a word, but not before memorizing the background noise. Not before deciding that I wasn't finished with them yet. Not by a long shot. I spent the next hour driving in circles, blood pounding harder with every mile. I wasn't going back to beg. I wasn't going back to fight. I was going back to reveal exactly what kind of man Lauren had replaced me with. I found the bar. It wasn't hard, small town, big mouths, and parked across the street. There they were, Lauren and T, sitting side by side in a booth, laughing like they'd already erased me. Lauren leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder in a way she never had with me even when things were good. She looked younger somehow, freer, like shedding me had lifted a weight she never wanted to carry. T was exactly what I expected. Mid-30s, cheap leather jacket, slick grin like he thought he owned the whole world. The kind of guy who peaked in high school and didn't know it yet. They didn't notice me standing there just inside the doorway. I watched for a long, bitter moment. Then I moved. I walked straight to their booth and dropped a plain manila envelope on the table between them. T leaned back, smirking. "What's this? A love letter?" Lauren's face drained of color. "Go ahead," I said, voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the whole bar. "Open it." T shrugged like he was humoring me, tore it open, and pulled out the stack of papers. His eyes scanned the first page, and I watched the smirk falter, confusion flickering across his face. Bank statements. Screenshots. Records. Not of Lauren. Of him. T had a lot of secrets. Debts he hadn't paid. A suspended license. A restraining order filed by an ex 3 towns over. Lauren had picked herself a real prize. I leaned closer, voice low enough for only them to hear. "You think you traded up, Lauren? You didn't trade up. You traded even lower than you already were." The booth went dead silent. Lauren reached for the papers with a trembling hand, flipping through them faster, panic rising like a tide she couldn't outswim. T shoved away from the table, fists clenching, but there was no swagger now. Only anger. Confusion. Fear. "You're lying," he growled. "Call your ex, ask her," I said. "Or better yet, check your car. Pretty sure there's a warrant on it." I turned on my heel and walked away before either of them could speak. Behind me, I heard Lauren's voice rise, sharp and desperate, laced with words like, "You said you handled it. And you told me. No one chased me. No one begged me to stay." I didn't need to look back to know the fantasy they built together was already collapsing, faster and uglier than either of them could handle. And this time I wasn't sticking around to watch the pieces fall. I had better things to do. Better places to be. I wasn't just taking my freedom. I was taking my dignity too. And I wasn't ever giving it back. I drove until the sun was just a smear of blood against the horizon. Until the town behind me was nothing but a bad memory shrinking in the rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was going, and for the first time it didn't matter. As long as it was away. The motel room was colder than before when I got back. Or maybe it was just me. I dropped the keys on the nightstand, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall again. But this time the emptiness was different. Cleaner. There was no one left to lie to. No one left to lie for. I thought that was the end. But around midnight, the pounding started. I opened the door without checking. Hannah stood there, cheeks blotchy, hair tangled, breathing like she'd run the whole way here. For a moment we just stared at each other. No words. No explanations. Then she shoved her way inside without waiting for permission. "You think you're so smart," she snapped, pacing the tiny room like a caged animal. "You think ruining everything makes you better?" I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, crossing my arms. "You're a little late for lectures," I said. "I hate you," she spat. "I hate what you did to her." I watched her, calm, unmoving, let her wear herself out. "You think you're the good guy?" She kept going, voice breaking now. "You're pathetic. You didn't even fight for us. You just ran away. That one hit different." "You're right," I said quietly. "I didn't fight. Not for her. Not for the lies." Hannah stopped pacing. She turned to face me, arms rigid at her sides. "So you're just giving up?" she said, voice rising. "You're just walking away? After everything?" I studied her. For the first time, really studied her. She wasn't the little girl I taught to ride a bike, or the teenager I cheered for at soccer games. She was someone else now. A mirror of Lauren's bitterness, warped and poisoned. "I'm not giving up," I said. "I'm choosing myself." "You don't care about me," she said. But it sounded weaker now. I let the silence stretch, heavy and cold between us. "I cared about you more than anything," I said. "But you made your choice." Her face crumpled for a second, just a flash, and then she shoved it all back down. "You're just mad because she picked someone better," she said. I almost laughed at that. Almost. "You don't even know who he is," I said. "You think you're getting some fairy tale. You're not. You're jealous," she accused. "Jealous?" I shook my head slowly. "Of a coward who hides behind cheap lies and fake promises? No, Hannah. I'm not jealous. I'm lucky." She glared at me, breathing hard, trying to summon the hate she wanted to feel. But it was slipping, cracking. You lied to me too, she whispered suddenly, voice wobbling. You let me believe. I let you believe you were loved. I interrupted. Because you were. She didn't have a comeback for that. She just stood there, shivering like the anger was the only thing keeping her warm. I didn't move toward her. Didn't reach out. She had to stand in that truth herself. You're not my real dad, she said again. But this time it wasn't a knife. It was a question. It was fear. No, I said. I'm not your biological father. But I was the one who stayed. I was the one who showed up. I was the one who loved you when it wasn't easy. And you're leaving, she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. I nodded. Because I deserve better, I said. And so do you. But you're too blind right now to see it. Hannah turned away, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. I don't know who I am anymore, she said, voice cracking. Neither do I said honestly. And for a long, aching minute we stood there, two broken people in a broken room, surrounded by the shattered pieces of a life that wasn't ever really real. Finally, Hannah wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. She looked smaller now. Not angry, not proud, just lost. Where will you go? She asked. I picked up my bag, slinging it over my shoulder again. Somewhere I can start over, I said. She nodded, slow and heavy. And then, without looking at me, she said, I'm sorry. It wasn't much. It wasn't enough. But it was something. I walked past her toward the door, hand on the knob, feeling the weight of everything settle one last time. Before I left, I said without turning around, don't make the mistake of thinking love means staying when everything is already dead. And then I was gone. I drove all night. No destination, no plan. Just asphalt, headlights, and the kind of exhaustion that doesn't touch your body but claws at your soul. The further I got from that town, the lighter I felt. The hurt wasn't gone. No, that kind of hurt sinks into your bones, but the weight of pretending, of clinging to people who wanted me broken, was starting to slip off. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was where it all ended. Clean break. No more calls. No more betrayal. But Lauren wasn't the type to let go when she lost control. It was just after dawn when my phone rang again. Unknown number. Persistent. I let it buzz itself to death 3 times before finally answering, more out of curiosity than anything else. Her voice hit me like a blast of cold air. You can't do this, she said without even bothering with hello. I pulled off to the side of the road, engine idling, and leaned back in the seat. I didn't speak. I just let her fill the silence. You think you're better than us now? She hissed. You think walking away makes you a hero? Still, I said nothing. You owe us, she shouted. You owe me. The raw panic bleeding through her voice wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. Her world was slipping through her fingers, and she didn't know how to hold on to it. You destroyed everything, she cried. That made me laugh. Actually laugh. A hard, bitter sound. I destroyed your lies, I said calmly. Not everything. You did that all by yourself. She was breathing hard now, desperate. I'll tell everyone you're abusive, she said, suddenly, venom in her words. I'll ruin you. I'll make sure no one ever looks at you without pity again. There it was. The last weapon in her arsenal, fear. I shook my head slowly even though she couldn't see me. Typical. Predictable. You think anyone's going to believe you? I said. After everything that's come out? You think they'll care? She shot back. People don't want truth. They want drama. And I can give them drama. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the cold rage settle deep inside me. You can try, I said. But you're forgetting one thing. What? She snapped. I have nothing left to lose. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. But then, soft and broken, she said, please. Don't leave me. The words were small. Defeated. The real Lauren, stripped of her armor and arrogance, for the first time. And maybe a part of me, the part that had stayed through years of cold looks and colder beds, felt a flicker of something. Pity, memory, grief. But love? No, that was dead and buried. You left me a long time ago, I said. I'm just finally catching up. I ended the call without another word and threw the phone onto the passenger seat like it was diseased. The sun was rising now, the road stretching out in front of me, endless and unknown. I had no home, no plan, no safety net. But for the first time in years, the future wasn't a prison. It was a door, and I wasn't afraid to walk through it. I don't know how long I drove. Hours blurred into each other. Gas stations, empty fields, flickering streetlights. I didn't feel tired anymore, just hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left the shell behind. I found a diner somewhere off the interstate, the kind of place that smells like burnt coffee and regret, and sat in a corner booth with a stale sandwich I wasn't hungry enough to eat. That's when the door swung open, and there she was, Hannah. She spotted me instantly, marched straight across the cracked linoleum floor without hesitation, and dropped into the booth across from me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. "You left," she said. Not angry this time, not accusing, just a simple fact she hadn't fully swallowed yet. I sipped my coffee, letting the silence hang. "You said you were starting over," she pressed, voice cracking just slightly. "What about me?" It hit harder than anything Lauren had ever thrown at me. Because for one blinding moment, I realized Hannah wasn't here to fight. She was here because she was lost. "You made your choice," I said quietly, not cruel, just real. "You picked your side." Her face twisted in frustration. "I didn't know it was this bad." I didn't know. She stopped herself, biting her lip hard enough to turn it white. "She lied to me." I sat back, watching her, trying to figure out if this was real or just another trick, another manipulation drilled into her by years of Lauren's poison. "You didn't want to know," I said. "You liked the version where I was the bad guy. It was easier." She looked down at her hands, picking at the frayed sleeve of her hoodie. "I don't want to stay with her," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. The words hit the table like a brick. I said nothing. Just waited. "I tried to call my real dad," she continued, forcing the words out. "The guy she said was my better dad. He doesn't want me." No tears. No drama. Just a hollow, broken truth laid bare between us. "He told me he has his own family now," she said, laughing bitterly. "Said he didn't even know if I was really his. Said Lauren probably lied about that too." I watched her crumble without touching her, without reaching across the table. "You're not going back to her," I said, voice low, final. It wasn't a question. Hannah shook her head, fast and desperate. "I don't know where else to go," she said. There it was. The hard part. The part that made every cell in my body rebel against itself. Because part of me, the broken, angry part, wanted to push her away, to tell her to drown with Lauren in the wreckage they made. But the man who had sat through ballet recitals and birthday parties and doctor appointments, the man who had tucked her into bed when she was 5 years old and scared of thunderstorms, he wasn't dead yet. He was battered. He was exhausted. But he was still breathing. "You're not a kid anymore," I said. "If you want to come with me, you have to understand something." She looked up, eyes wide, scared but hungry for anything that wasn't that house, that lie, that woman. "There's no going back," I said. "Not for me. Not for you. If you come with me, you don't get to play games. You don't get to pick and choose when it's easy." She nodded so fast it almost looked like she was shaking. "I get it," she said, voice raw. "I'm not your father," I said, cutting sharp. "Not by blood." She flinched but stayed silent. "But I was the only real one you ever had." "I know," she whispered. And somehow that admission hurt more than any of the betrayal before it. I closed my eyes for a long second, fighting a war inside myself I didn't even have the strength to name anymore. When I opened them, she was still sitting there, still waiting, still hoping. "Finish your food," I said gruffly. "We're leaving in 10. She gave a tiny, broken nod and picked up the sandwich with trembling hands. I didn't say anything else. I just leaned back, staring out the dirty window as the sun started bleeding into the sky, wondering if it was possible to rebuild something out of so much wreckage. Wondering if it was even worth trying. We left the diner behind without looking back. The truck rolled onto the highway, engine humming low and steady, the miles swallowing the past one by one. Hannah sat beside me, knees drawn up against her chest, staring out the window with a hollow-eyed silence that didn't ask for comfort and wouldn't accept it even if offered. It wasn't peace between us. It was something harder. An unspoken agreement between two people who had nothing left to lose. I didn't ask her why she wanted to come. I didn't ask if she regretted it already. Some things didn't need to be dragged into the light to exist. We crossed 2 state lines before the phone started vibrating again, buried somewhere deep in the glove compartment where I'd thrown it the night before. I ignored it. Another mile, another call. Another mile, another voicemail. By the 3rd one, Hannah finally turned to me. "You should check it," she said, voice thin. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But something in her tone made me pull over onto the gravel shoulder and dig it out. 5 missed calls. All from unknown numbers. And 1 new voicemail. I played it on speaker without thinking, the truck filling with Lauren's voice, raw and frantic and burning with a kind of desperation I hadn't heard before. "You think you're done with me?" She snapped, half sobbing, half snarling. "You think you can just take her and disappear? She's mine. You hear me? She's mine." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Hannah flinched, her arms wrapping tighter around herself. "You don't get to rewrite history," Lauren's voice crackled through the speaker. "You're a joke. You're nothing. She'll come back. They always come back." A high, broken laugh, manic and choking. "I'll find you," she hissed. "No matter where you run, I'll find you." The message ended with a harsh click that left the truck vibrating in the dead silence. Hannah didn't say anything. Neither did I. We both understood exactly what that meant. Lauren wasn't letting go. Not because she loved Hannah. Not because she wanted a family. Because she hated losing. Because she hated being powerless. And she would burn down everything, including her own daughter, just to feel like she still mattered. I started driving again. Faster this time. Pushing the truck harder. Feeling every mile like a fist tightening in my gut. We made it to another town by nightfall. A nowhere place with a dusty motel that didn't ask questions and a diner that served rubber pancakes and weak coffee. I paid cash. I kept the lights low. I didn't let Hannah out of my sight. We were 2 fugitives, not from the law, but from a life that wanted to drag us back into hell. Around midnight, there was a knock at the door. 3 short, hard raps. I grabbed the chair and wedged it under the doorknob, motioning for Hannah to stay silent. Another knock. Louder. More urgent. "Open the door," a voice called out. Not Lauren's. A man's. My blood went cold. T. Of course it would be him. Lauren couldn't do her own dirty work anymore. She had sent the garbage she chose over us to clean up her mess. I pressed a finger to my lips. Hannah nodded, wide-eyed, trembling. Another pound on the door. Then another. "You think you can just take her?" T barked, voice thick with anger and something uglier, entitlement. "You don't get to take what's not yours." The door rattled in its frame. I thought about opening it. Thought about what would happen if I did. But no, not tonight. Not on his terms. Instead, I picked up the phone on the nightstand, the old dusty landline, and dialed the front desk. "Police," I said, voice calm, measured. "Room 12. Now." The pounding stopped suddenly, like T realized he'd overplayed his hand. Heavy footsteps retreated down the hallway. Tires screeched in the parking lot moments later. I didn't breathe until I heard the sirens in the distance. Didn't move until the blue and red lights flashed through the curtains. 2 officers knocked this time. Real ones. I opened the door just wide enough to explain, to make sure the report was filed, to make sure they understood. If he came back, we wouldn't be the ones running. Hannah stood behind me, silent, watching everything, learning in real time what it meant to finally choose yourself. When the officers left, I closed the door, locked every bolt, and slid down onto the floor, feeling the weight of everything pressed down on my shoulders at once. Hannah sat across from me, hugging her knees. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, she said something without anger, without blame. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. I nodded, slow and heavy. "You're not going back," I said. And I meant it, no matter what it cost, no matter what it broke inside me. This was the line, and I wasn't stepping back again. Morning hit like a slap across the face. We checked out before the sun had even fully risen, the motel clerk barely glancing up from his newspaper as I handed him the key. No questions. No goodbyes. I stuffed our few bags into the truck bed, feeling the ache of sleepless nights clawing at my spine, but I pushed through it. There wasn't time for weakness. Not now. Not yet. Hannah slid into the passenger seat without a word. She didn't ask where we were going. She didn't even look at me. She just sat there, staring out at the empty road stretching into nowhere, her small hands fisted in the fabric of her hoodie. I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. We pulled onto the highway without looking back. Lauren would come looking. I knew that. T would too if he thought there was anything left to salvage from the mess he helped create. But they would be chasing shadows. Because the people they had broken, the man, the girl, were already gone. We drove for hours in silence, the kind of silence that wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Honest. Something we could both breathe in without choking. At some point, we pulled off into a rest stop overlooking a cracked stretch of desert that went on forever. I killed the engine and we sat there, the two of us, with nothing but the endless empty sky above us. Hannah finally spoke. What happens now? She asked, voice small but steady. I thought about lying to her. Thought about telling her it would all be okay, that we'd find a new house, a new life, a new version of normal. But I didn't come this far just to feed her another pretty story. I don't know, I said. She nodded like she expected that. Will she ever stop? She asked. I didn't hesitate. No. That was the truth. Lauren would never stop needing control. Needing attention. Needing to win even if it meant destroying everyone in her path. But we don't have to be there for it, I added. We don't have to be part of her story anymore. Hannah wiped her sleeve across her face, fierce and fast, like she hated that I even saw it. I don't hate you, she blurted out suddenly. The words hit harder than any scream or accusation could have. I know, I said quietly, and that was enough. We sat there for a long time, letting the weight of everything bleed out into the desert air. The years of lies, the betrayals, the war we didn't ask for but survived anyway. Finally, I reached into my jacket and pulled out the last thing I had taken from that house. A single photograph, crumpled but not torn. It was a picture of me and Hannah years ago, her on my shoulders at a fair, both of us laughing so hard the photo caught us mid-blur. Before the lies, before the walls. I handed it to her without a word. She took it, hands trembling just slightly, and stared at it for a long, long time. Then she tucked it carefully into her pocket, like it was the only thing in the world she trusted not to vanish. We'll figure it out, she said. Not a question. A promise. I looked out at the empty road again, the horizon burning gold in the rising sun. No, I said. We'll build something better. And this time we wouldn't build it on lies. We wouldn't pretend for anyone. We would build it broken, bruised, bleeding if we had to, but it would be real. I started the truck. We pulled back onto the highway, the desert swallowing our old lives behind us. And we didn't look back. Not once.